some of you were with us and some of you weren't. And so I just kind of will do a recap. And then I know that one of the things that was brought up, at least in our last discussion, was First Amendment in regard to, I think, the Citizens United case. And so I went to that to take a look at some of the issues there. And I have to tell you that we don't have enough time today, tomorrow, the next day, or probably for the rest of the week to discuss everything involved with that case. But we can discuss some of it and hopefully get some, it's a very complex case dealing with some complex issues, but I think we can get a rough thing on that. So the title of this, and I've talked to the others who are on this before, is that the 6 freedoms. And we talked about this last time, and I kind of outlined that there are 6 freedoms within the United States Constitution. A lot of people perceive it to be 5. And in fact, my daughter, I don't know if I told this story, my daughter was in school, and it was a history class, and the textbook that she had indicated that there were 5 freedoms within the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. And that always kind of bothers me. So I wrote the editor and I said, no, there are not 5 freedoms. There's actually 6 freedoms. And I do give credit to the editor. He wrote me back. He said, well, we understand what you say, but most people in this area refer to it as 5 freedoms. And I said, well, you know, if you're going to start removing freedoms from people, I guess I'll leave it up to you and it won't be my problem. But the fact of the matter is that there's the freedom of speech, there's the freedom of press, there's the freedom to assemble, there's the freedom to petition the government. And then here's where people get confused sometimes. There's a freedom to have free exercise of religion. So people are able to exercise the religion that they want to. And then there's a freedom from the establishment of a religion. So the government cannot establish a religion. Now, one of the things we talked about when I was here before is we talked about the litigation involving the First Amendment really didn't develop until after the Civil War. In fact, the first free exercise case comes in about 1876, and it involves a Mormon who is challenging a federal law prohibiting multiple marriages. And so that is at least the first time that it's addressed. And then it's basically in the 20th century where a lot of this law gets developed. And you know that, I don't know if I don't think I talked about it last time. That is comes as because of the unique, what I call unique marriage of a written constitution with a common law system. And what I'm saying there is that I don't know if I, you know, those of you who were there last time, tell me if I've talked about this or not. Did I talk about this? Okay. I like talking about this because this is a unique aspect to understand about the founding of the country and gives you at least some perspective. I think that some of people may say that the Constitution is a living document and that it adopts to where we are in our time. So if we're in the 20th century, it adopts to the standards of the 20th century. If we're in the 21st century, it adopts to those standards. Others talk about what we call textual integrity or originalist, where we look at the how it was adopted when it was first originally adopted. And so those seem to be the two competing interests. And I like to give a little perspective on it because a typical person will tell you that the American judicial system is about 250 years old. Well, really, it's about 800 years old. It dates back to the 1100s in the English common law system. The common law system is basically a system of judge-made and interpreted laws. Parliament makes laws, but the courts interpret those laws and apply those. And understand, that the court system in England existed before there was a parliament. There was the king and he made laws, but the laws were applied through the court system. And so we developed, or England developed, what's called the common law system. The common law system exists in those countries that were part of the former British Empire. So you think about that. United States, Australia, India, and the other colonies, South Africa, different colonies of the British Empire. Betty, it'll get interesting in a minute, okay? I understand it's late afternoon. I'm feeling tired too, but I'll try and make it exciting in a minute.
I'm sorry, I missed something.
Oh, well, Betty had a yawn and I kind of wanted to.
Oh, okay.
So here's my point is that the English common law system develops through legal precedent. Judges write decisions and that becomes the law. And so add in there certain enactments by kings and also by Parliament. Now, probably the first act that everybody points to is the Magna Carta. Magna Carta is signed in 1215. What had happened was King John is spending outrageous amounts of money on the Crusades. And he has lost favor with the barons, or basically the leaders in the country. And they come after him. Well, he ends up signing an agreement with them at Runnymede. This agreement is what's called Magna Carta. Magna Carta is the Great Charter, and it includes certain protections for things that we expect today. What we refer to as the Fifth Amendment, the right not to speak against yourself, was included in the Magna Carta. Due process included in the Magna Carta. But really, the Magna Carta is a failed document. It solved the problem at that time with King John, but after that, you had other strong kings who ignored those provisions. But only when they were in trouble, when they were in political trouble, did they reaffirm the Magna Carta. And so each time the Magna Carta gets reaffirmed, it gets a little more powerful. You know, I guess the example there is that even an absolute monarch still relies upon consent of the governed. Without the consent of that governed, then an absolute monarch doesn't have the power. So move ahead. The English system develops both under judge-made law and parliamentary enactments. Some of those parliamentary enactments include a Bill of Rights, but England never adopts a written constitution. Their constitution is just an unwritten law that's developed through case law. So you come to the 18th century. We declared independence from England, and then we adopt a constitution, pretty much out of necessity. We adopt this constitution out of necessity because we're trying to create a country out of a collection of states. And without a central federal authority, there are several things that just can't be done. You can't keep a military running. Washington was very frustrated about the fact he couldn't pay his military. You can't do international trade. It's very tough. You can't declare war. You can't have relationships with other countries. And understand that at the latter part of the 18th century, you're dealing with the French, the English, all competing for international dominance. And the United States is a prize. France and England had fought over it in the French and Indian War, or what you call the 7 Years' War. And they were still looking at that. And so there needed to be some kind of centralized federal authority. And that's where the Constitution comes in. But to get the Constitution adopted and get states on board, I think we all kind of know this, but I'll just reiterate it, is that there needed to be some rights outlined. And there were different theories on government. So without getting too in depth, but to try and give you some things to work on here,
Mhm.
you have John Locke. And John Locke's theory on government was that when you entered into, that you start out in a state of nature, when you enter into a government, you hold on to certain rights. You hold on to certain rights that the government can never take away from you, but that you give up some rights to enter into a government so that you have less chaos. That's Locke. You have another theorist, which is Thomas Hobbes. Hobbes says you enter into it, you give up all your rights. And you basically enter into it and you give up the rights, but you're giving up the rights so that you can have safety and security. Now, Locke's theories are prevalent through Jeffersonian type ideology. And what I would, in particular, what I'd say is that you read the Declaration of Independence, it says that you have certain inalienable rights: life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So life and liberty are, you get to hold on to, you own those. And the government can never take those away from you because they're inalienable rights. Now, I think all of you are going to kind of agree with that in general. That is until you read the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution, which the Fifth Amendment says that life, liberty, and property can be taken away from you by due process. So if they're inalienable rights, they shouldn't be able to take away from you, but the Constitution says they can be. So you have these two theories competing against each other when we adopt. But to get states to adopt the Constitution, the certain states wanted some guarantees of certain rights, and those rights had to be protected. And that's where you come up with the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution. It was meant to get states to adopt it. First Amendment outlined some very important rights that everyone thought was important. Second Amendment, Third Amendment, Fourth Amendment, all the way down. The Ninth and 10th Amendment, basically the Ninth Amendment says any rights that aren't listed here, you hold those. You get to keep them. Even though they're not listed here, the only way that the government can take away your right is by actually outlining those. So rights that aren't mentioned here, you still hold on to. And that was one of the arguments in, and I think I talked to this group about it, but that was one of the arguments in Connecticut. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that case went out on me. The penultimate case to Roe versus Wade, which is versus Connecticut. I cannot believe.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're referring to,
But
and I can't think of it either.
But that case, I always like to bring it up and use it because there were 4 distinct arguments in that. There's one argument, which is Douglas's argument, and it says that there's this penumbra of rights that emanate from the Constitution that say that that because of this emanation, you have these this right to privacy. There's another part of that argument that says, no, that's a little bit out there. That's crazy. But the Ninth Amendment has some reserved rights. And those rights that are reserved in the Ninth Amendment include right to privacy. And then there's another one that says, what? You guys are all off base. No, it's the due process clause. And then finally, there's the dissent in that case, which says, guys, this is a stupid law, but we can't overturn law because it's stupid. Yes.
Griswold versus Connecticut.
Yeah, that's it. Griswold. Yeah.
Yeah, I looked it up.
So
I'm not trying to be a smarty pants here. I wanted to know.
I just, you know what? It's
Yeah.
that, and I'll tell you how I always think about it. I have to think in my mind.
Yeah.
It's the family from National Lampoon's Vacation. The plaintiff. So.
Oh, my husband's favorite movie.
So back to what I was trying to, my original premises.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. Is that my original premises is, you take a common law system, which has an unwritten constitution where everything's interpreted over time. And it's always subject to change through court interpreted law. marry that with a constitution. When the founders created the Constitution, I don't know if they thought that this would be as absolute of a law as it is. Understand that it becomes an absolute law in 1803 with Marbury versus Madison, where it says that the court can review laws to determine if they're constitutional. And so what that says is that there's a hierarchy in laws, and the most important law is that written constitution. And so we've taken and we've married this system that the British have of interpreting law over time with a constitution that's written in a point of time. And that's how those two have married together. I've said a lot. Questions?
No,
Anything? Comments?
it makes sense. No, it's very complex, you know, and
Well,
you're doing well. Yeah, it's very complex because you've got so many trains of thought and ideologies going into this, and well, here we are 200 years later. Can't be all bad, you know. I mean,
Stephen, you're new to it. Any things that you had that I may have thrown out there? Okay. Okay. Betty, did you have anything?
No.
I was, when you were saying about, you know, the three inalienable rights or whatever, the for life, liberty,
And pursuit of happiness.
yeah. I was just thinking that, you know, I thought, okay, yes, those are inalienable rights, but if you break the law, you know, you forfeit some of those.
Okay. Yeah, that's true.
So, you know, so I don't know what to say beyond that, but you know, it's just
But I mean, you think about that. Think about that. Is that if it's an inalienable right, you know, understand this is the one thing that, and this is the broader concept of law. In the legal system, words have meaning. Every word has meaning. And so if a right is an inalienable right, well, that means it can't be taken away from you.
right.
And so when the state starts taking it away from you, you are right. From a practical standpoint, if you violate the law, rights should be taken away from you.
Yeah.
And I don't know that when
Yeah.
when Jefferson wrote that line, that he was trying to eliminate criminal law. But that's the necessary implication of that statement,
Yeah.
potentially.
Oh.
Go ahead.
I don't mean to muddy the waters, but there's a couple things that come to mind, and you know, it's stuff that's familiar to us, but you know, from the beginning, like whole groups of people were excluded. Well, come on, you know, the people that were brought over from Africa, you know, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, you know, but in their way of thinking, I don't think they. I don't. You just love to get in their mindset that they could say that on paper, and then treat people entirely different. You know.
Well, that's very easy because they were white landowning males.
Okay, you know that's a. I know that's an argument. You know.
No, not an argument at all. They were.
It worked, but I think there's something deeper here, and I can't put my brain cells on it. There's something deeper here besides, you know, white patriot, you know, whatever.
Yeah, landowning males. That's all it
There's
is.
something
And they were white.
I know, but there just seems like there's
Blacks were property at the time.
Right.
yeah, it's just
I
something
think that's, yeah,
something
blacks were
deeper here. I
property.
can't-
They were not, they
Yeah,
weren't, I mean,
and women.
they weren't considered.
yeah, I know
Property.
that.
So
They were 1/4 of a person.
Right.
Yeah, 3/5,
How
yeah.
about females, 100 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah,
So, well, what does that mean, everybody? I
Yeah,
mean,
what's it-
okay,
yeah,
so what is that? I guess there's a question I'm going to throw out at you, okay?
yeah, that's the question I have. What does this mean? I'm looking for deeper meaning, and
Also, I guess that's what I'm asking, is that, okay,
yeah, what is the
so,
deeper meaning here?
well, I don't know. I guess the
Yeah,
question
I
I
don't
have is
either.
this.
But it bothers me.
Well,
Things
okay,
bother me.
it bothers you. Okay, let's get it out there. Okay, let's ask that question.
Yeah.
Um,
Ah,
Thomas Jefferson, we all know, owned slaves.
yeah.
So do we say Thomas Jefferson owned slaves, ergo, any idea, any thought, any contribution he had should be dismissed because of his ownership of slaves exclusively?
Oh, no. And the reason, I'm borrowing from Sister Virgin, if I'm saying that correctly, the
Oh,
death penalty person, none,
yeah.
and one of my favorite phrases from her is, a person is worth more than the worst thing they've ever done. You know, if the worst thing that Jefferson did, and I don't know, I'm not God, okay? If the worst thing he ever did was have slaves, well, then overall, because he's a human being and we have to respect him as such.
It
Right.
isn't the worst thing he did. He raped his slaves.
Okay, fine,
Right.
fine. He raped, he might have killed. Okay,
Yes, he
but
did.
yes, he did. But he's still better overall than the worst thing he ever did. That's my
That
opinion.
depends if you're coming from a psychological standpoint, a physical standpoint, or ideological
It
or
comes from
religious.
comes from my faith values, and I consider myself more of a person of my faith than I am American, which
There
gets
you
me in
go.
trouble. Which gets me in
Okay.
trouble a lot.
No, it doesn't. Stick up for yourself.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
I don't know you and I love you. Good for you. Stick up for yourself.
Thank you, thank you.
Well, I guess the question comes up is that at least, there's a large number of the founders who were slave owners. There's a large number of the founders who were abolitionists.
Yeah,
Yes, they
Uh,
were.
And so what do we,
yeah.
do we take the ideas that they have and dismiss them, or what do we do?
No, the
We,
problem is we're trying
yeah,
to think, we're trying to have their mindset 250 years ago to our mindset today. They don't gel all the time.
Right, I guess I would disagree that originalists or textualists want to do that. What they're trying to do is try and determine what the original intent of it was. I don't know that they're trying to get into the
yeah,
minds. For example, I mean, the idea that there is a wall between church and state,
yeah.
that comes from a letter that Jefferson wrote that was used in a case decision, and then subsequently has been used over and over as an argument about what the First Amendment does. And
Mhm.
whether that's true or not, I don't know that I completely agree
Okay.
with the wall.
Yeah.
Jefferson wrote that. It's nowhere in the Constitution.
Well, here's one of the things is that I'm always a little suspect of accepting anything that Jefferson says about the Constitution. In
It
1780,
was not written in the Constitution, church and state.
Jefferson was in France at the time, ensconced with their revolution.
Yes, he
Mhm.
was.
So it was a complete failure.
Mhm. Hmm.
Yes, it was.
I mean, I think that I think people are sometimes a little concerned about talking about what do I want to use the word? The word I want to use is people. The United States is unique. Its
Mhm.
revolution is unique.
Mhm.
Its founding is unique. Even today, as a country, I don't know that you can find another country that is composed in the way
Uh-huh.
we are. That does not mean that we are superior. What I'm trying to
Right.
say is that
Yeah.
we have a unique structure.
Uh-huh.
You may not agree with that. I don't know. I mean, I
Yeah.
open that up.
Yeah.
I'm sure every country says that.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? That may be true, but in
It is
regard
true.
in regard, well, I'm going to tell you is that, I mean, I'll say it now, is that I don't know that I can name another country that has um, that is as diverse in its culture as the United States.
Canada,
No, no.
I beg to differ.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's fine. I would say in size and diversity, the United States is a much more complex country.
Yeah,
But I
Um,
mean, in regard, but okay, you can disagree. That's fine.
yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah.
I
I
think
like.
we've gone off, and I don't want to do that. I wanted.
Yeah. I could.
My
I,
point
yeah,
is, you know what, and I think I will say, I'm sorry, I've gotten us off. I
No,
think
don't.
the
Yeah.
thing we wanted to talk about too was Citizen United. I think a lot of people wanted to talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the first part of Citizen United that gets a little bit complex for people is that a corporation is referred to as a person. And I think that a lot of people get bothered by that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
that is, go
yeah.
ahead.
And the reason the stick this trying to speak English today. The sticking point with me with the corporation business is I think if the group of people are one voice, that's one thing, okay? But I I'm not sure if I dug deep enough into there, but I went to the library and I spent about 3 hours on this. Not that just because you spent 3 hours on it, you're a genius, okay? But I was doing some reading and the heads of the corporation were making the decisions where to spend that PAC money without the consent of everybody that was part of that corporation.
And that's why they get sued, yeah.
And that's what bothers me. It's not so much that the corporation is considered a person, it's just that corporation was really not a corporation because there was not consensus.
Well, let's
No,
go.
it's about greed and money.
Yeah, but that's what bothered me about the case.
Yes,
Citizens United involves a group that had produced a movie. They
Yeah.
produced a movie about Hillary Clinton.
Hmm.
They wanted to be able to distribute it through on-demand video.
Hmm.
There is a law that says that prohibits corporations and unions from using their general treasury funds to make independent expenditures for speech defined as electioneering communication
Hmm.
or for speech expressly advocating the election or defeat of a candidate.
That's it. That's you've got it. You nailed it. That's
Citizens
it.
United argued that because it was on demand. Now, understand that had to be for any speech that is disseminated to 50,000 or more people.
Uh-huh.
Citizens United argued, and they had brought this as what they call a declaratory judgment action. They wanted the court to rule whether or not what they intended to do was constitutional
Okay.
or legal under the law.
Okay.
Their argument was it's on demand, so it's only being sent to one person at a time, not 50,000. The argument on the other side was, no, there's 34 million people who have this cable and they have access to it. So 34 million is who you want to see it, and that's who you're sending it out to.
Oh.
So that was the arguments right there.
Oh. Okay.
Now, the Supreme Court had two applications. They were asked to either decide if the law was unconstitutional as applied to Citizens United, and therefore see if they could craft out an exception to the law allowing Citizens United, or if the law was unconstitutional as it applied to everyone. And so they said the Supreme Court says there's no exception we can carve out. This is limiting on speech and chills speech, and so therefore they found it unconstitutional. That's where that ruling comes from.
Okay.
And so that's where that decision comes from.
Okay.
And it is rooted in First Amendment protections. In particular, is that the argument was, if you have what we call a prior restraint, this is what they call a prior restraint, where the law inhibits somebody from doing something, and so it's a prior restraint on their ability to do it. It chills the speech and therefore makes the speech,
Okay,
it limits the amount of speech. And
okay,
the Supreme Court on this decision was trying to free up speech as opposed to limit it. Now, in the context of it, I think a lot of people have some arguments in regard to, when you
Yeah.
talk about a corporation, they have greater access to funds.
uh-huh,
The law was trying to limit where those funds could come from.
okay,
But the
Yeah.
Supreme Court says
uh-huh,
that that money is equivalent to speech, at least in this particular case.
okay.
So obviously the case is very controversial, still
Yeah,
controversial,
yeah,
upsetting
yeah.
to people. And so, the question comes up to you, the corporations have been determined to be persons
Mm-hmm.
for purposes of keeping them adhering to certain laws. Understand, the first mention, I think, of a corporation as a person is in 800 in India. And it continues since then. That
Uh-huh.
corporations have always been assumed to be legal persons for purposes of entering into contracts, being liable for
Mhm.
acts that they do, being responsible criminally for acts that they undertake.
Okay,
And so those are the
Yeah.
reasons behind that.
uh-huh.
I know that raises lots of questions. So
Yeah, yeah. No, I
thoughts,
can
I do.
follow, I can follow the reasoning and I respect it, okay? Okay, you made it very clear, but yeah, there's always a but, right? Um, I'm still just hesitant, like I said at the beginning, and I'm just stubborn. I'm 90% German. I'm stubborn. Um, I just I just can't quite see them as a person if they're not having consensus. I know it's kind of like a representative thing, just like our government, maybe that's where they're trying to make the equivalence that you don't have to have 100% of the people saying where each dollar goes to. Maybe that enters into the argument someplace. And before I forget, my other thought was, and I'm not sure, and I don't know too much about the history of corporations in our country, but I was told, or I heard the argument from somebody that at the beginning of, back in the 1800s, corporations were temporary things. They were just for a single purpose, like building a road or whatever. And then the corporation wasn't there anymore. But as time went on, you got to the Gilded Age type of stuff.
Well, I would say no. I think the whole idea behind a corporation
Uh-huh.
was to survive the life of a person.
Okay. Okay.
was-
Then I
It
was
it
misinformed.
was meant to have the same liability
Okay.
in other parts of a person, but it was
hmm
meant to survive people
Okay.
because people have limited lives.
Okay. That
Don't
was
you think it becomes corruption and greed at that point? What do they have?
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go on. I'm sorry. Say that again.
Don't you think it's more like corruption and greed? What do they have to gain? What do they have to lose if it doesn't go through? If the movie doesn't get produced, if the movie doesn't get made, if the movie doesn't get presentation?
Well, what they have to lose. This
Mhm.
corporation, understand, Citizens United is a corporation formed for the purpose of making political arguments. So their speech gets destroyed, is what they would say.
So it's all about pressure, greed, and what can they gain by doing it?
No,
How does that help us?
well, I think that the argument is that their speech gets destroyed by the law. The law what they're saying is this law. I want to read you the law.
I understand that part. I don't
Okay.
have a problem with that part. But there's a bigger picture here.
Okay.
It's all about them. What do they have to gain? And it's not about speech, if you think about it. How much revenue do they have to gain?
Hmm.
Isn't that always the culprit? Who has what to gain by doing what?
Well, I think that everybody's advocacy within the political process system has to do about gain.
Hmm.
Well, let's see, if it's political process, then they gain either Republican or Democratic help or whomever's in power.
Well, I would argue
And they
that,
use it as pressure.
I guess I would argue that anybody who's engaging in the political process is doing so that they can gain something.
Exactly. So, well, what did they have to gain? How's it going to help you and I? And I understand freedom of speech. I have no problem with that. I do understand that.
No, I understand.
But there's a bottom line here. The bottom
Okay.
line is, what happens if they get that speech? What happens if they produce that movie and they sway enough people to donate more money, blah, 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 to their cause? That's
Okay.
my concern.
Well, I understand that's the concern, but how do you make that a way to take away their speech? I mean, go ahead.
I understand that point. I really do understand what you're saying, and I agree with that part of it. I do. But I want to get to the meat of the matter here. And
Well,
the people that you're talking about in the Supreme Court, 3 of them didn't like it at all. Okay. So, it's deeper than that. It's deeper than just freedom of speech. What else do they have to gain?
Are you saying that the members of the Supreme Court had something to gain?
I'm saying, well, members of the Supreme Court, that's another story. We lost Ruth.
Hmm.
Okay.
Okay. And because of that, I think companies are taking advantage, corporations are taking advantage, and I think it's all about gain money. And I understand freedom of speech, I really do.
Well, I think that I understand where you're coming from. I think that that in this particular case, I at least understand where they're coming from a First Amendment, a particular issue. I think that anytime that you have money, people, ideas, it throws into it some complexity. So I guess I would have to say we have to agree that it is complex.
Yes, yes.
And protecting individual rights is always going to be a complex circumstance.
Mhm.
Exactly. I mean, even freedom of speech has limitations. You can't yell fire in a movie theater if there's no fire, on and on and on.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We talked about that, yeah, before. Other thoughts on this? Anything that you want to throw out there?
No.
Okay. That's what I had focused. That's what I focused on because I wanted to get there with you. What's funny is that this is one of those first years that I'm not seeing the usual ubiquitous cases where somebody wants to keep some village, town, city from putting up some kind of display during Christmas.
There you go.
Oh.
There's always some kind of litigation on that.
Yeah.
Yes, let's take baby Jesus,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah. And Rossford, they have the nativity scene, and I think that's city
Yes.
property. And
Yeah.
and it's really a focal point when you have Santa Claus and the reindeer coming towards the nativity scene.
Especially at a courthouse without,
I'm sorry.
especially a courthouse having the 10 Commandments in it.
Oh yeah. That's Toledo. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Yeah.
Freedom of speech, huh?
Yeah. I guess the Christmas display, it used to bother me, but now I think there's bigger fish to fry. But that's just me. Okay. I think there's more may I say, important things to discuss than a nativity scene. But we've got really big issues. If I can digress, if we can just get we can just get if we can just get to inauguration day, folks. I mean, that weighs on my mind more heavily than a nativity scene. Okay, uh, that's an issue.
I think people, well, so that's what I've had in regard to, I wanted to talk about that Citizens United.
Yeah, thank you.
I wanted to make sure that we got that out there. And let's have a quick conversation about, we've kind of hit the First Amendment. Obviously, I can do more on that.
Uh-huh.
But if you'd like to make this a regular thing for next year, I'd be happy to do this.
Oh, I'd like it
But
very much.
I would really like to have some
Yeah.
guidance and direction
Uh-huh.
on where you'd like to discuss things. I mean,
Uh-huh.
are there certain aspects of the Constitution that you want to have as topics? I
Uh-huh.
would be more than happy to do that.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
I've got an idea. I don't know if it fits in with this because I've got my agendas. But I don't know if you can see this book. Well, probably not. But I'm reading this book about the Lakotas.
Oh, it's a great book. Yeah.
Did you read this?
Yes, I have.
Oh, I'm halfway through. I'm gonna finish this baby.
You're in for a surprise.
Yes. Anyways, and especially since now the I'm a college graduate. I keep on forgetting things. But do the cabinet members, do they have to be confirmed by the Senate?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I thought so. I was digging back. And especially now that we have, and hopefully she gets confirmed. And I forgot her name, but she's of Native American Indian descent for Department of Interior.
Yeah.
I know who.
Yeah. There are some issues that I don't believe we have addressed as a country. And one of that is I think we still haven't really addressed the Constitution and how that fits in with tribes and sovereign nations in this country that go way back. Would that be a constitutional topic
Well,
or not?
you'd have
If it
to.
isn't, it's okay.
No, I guess I don't understand. I mean, I guess I would want to know. I mean, at least in tribal, it's interesting. I worked with a tribal judge at one time. I
Oh,
found it interesting as to how they interpret the law.
yeah.
They use statutory law,
Mm-hmm.
constitutional law, and
Uh-huh.
then they also apply tribal custom.
Yeah.
And they're able to do that into that.
Yeah.
I guess that I guess that within the confines of the Constitution,
Yeah.
it'd have to be a specific issue, is what I would say.
Oh, okay. I'll think
I
about
mean,
it.
I'm willing to talk about the law and different
I'll think
aspects
about
of
it.
that. And I mean,
Okay.
if you had a specific, well, for example, we could talk about the case that recently made most of Oklahoma part of
Yeah.
a reservation.
Yeah. I found
And
that fascinating.
I'd be willing to look at that case and give you some insight into how that works. I think a lot of that has to do with
Uh-huh.
treaties that are now being advanced. I expect
Okay.
a lot more cases to come forward with
Mhm.
that decision.
Yeah.
But I also expect it to have some impact on
Uh-huh.
some practical impact on the ground of how that goes.
Okay. Okay. Well,
Um,
anyways, you're asking for ideas, so I
No, I
just
think that's a great idea. I would entertain any ideas
okay.
that you might want to, or talk about certain aspects
Yeah.
of the Constitution. But if you also want to go into legal ideas, theories,
Right.
things that we talk about, the reality of the law today as we deal with it in the criminal justice system,
Mhm.
I think is something that people are always wanting to know. I mean, there's a lot of debate and a lot of issue about how we handle certain matters within the criminal justice system, from matters of drug addiction
Mhm.
and other aspects of that.
Mhm.
We spent this past year people promoting certain ideas on how criminal justice system should address things.
Mhm.
We can talk about those and what the practical approach is. I don't know if Liz wants to do this, but if Liz collected it and we set up a once a month meeting,
Yeah,
I'm willing to talk about any legal issue and I can do that.
yeah,
So
I
I'm
would like,
always- What's that?
I would like that very much.
Okay.
yeah. Oh, and backtracking a little bit to the legal system and the court system and here in Lucas, I'm not really up what's going on in Wood County, okay, but here in Lucas County, um, you know, the sheriff who's retiring was really big on drug courts and
Hmm.
focus more on rehabilitation. Does that, something like that with the Constitution? Is
Well,
that
no,
what-
we can talk about drug courts and the focus on
Yeah.
rehabilitation. That's a
Yeah,
big thing. I mean,
yeah, I think it's wonderful, but I'm sure there's people who think, these people just need to be punished and they'll reform their evil ways and all that. Um,
well, I guess what I would say is, I don't know that that's, you know what? I would say that most people today
Yeah.
have a family member, a friend
Uh-huh.
of a family member, something like that,
Yeah.
who have in some way have some kind of drug addiction. And I
Right.
think that there is a popular movement across the board
Mm-hmm.
for drug courts and things like that. Really, the question comes into a more nuanced
Uh-huh.
is, should certain drugs be illegal?
Oh, okay.
And that's a
You
big
mean like
issue.
marijuana or so on?
Yeah, and I think that it's a complex question. It's a complex issue,
Yeah.
and it's one that
Yeah.
I can tell you, at least from my perspective as a judge, what I see.
Okay. That would
So,
be a good thing to discuss. I would like that.
so whatever you want to throw out
Yeah.
there, if you've got
Yeah.
ideas, if you want to talk about different things like that,
Uh-huh. That'd be
I
good.
think that's terrific.
Yeah.
and I would be happy to do that once a month, Liz, if you want to set that up.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. And Monday afternoons are probably going to be the best after 3:00.
Okay.
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 Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I want to thank you folks. I thank you for your time. Not all of this is always that interesting. It's interesting to me, but it might not be all to you. But I do appreciate your thoughts, ideas, and comments, and I wish you a happy holiday.
Same
Okay.
to you, sir.
We'll see you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Matt. We appreciate it. Have a
Bye.
good one.
Yeah.